Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 167th episode of Real Hawk Talk. This is Brian Nemhauser at Hawk Blogger on Twitter. And tonight we've got a special show. For the first time this season, we are going to bring in a guest. Arif Hasan is going to join us, a honorary member of Seahawks Twitter and a actual Vikings fan and Vikings insider. So really looking forward to having him join us here in just a bit. Before we get to that fun conversation, let me bring in the fellas. We've got Evan Hill at Evan Hill HB. How you doing, Evan?
Good, man. It's good to see you guys. I feel like it's been a while, even though it's only been 3 days, 4 days.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. A little bit of quiet time does the soul good after a tough loss. Next, Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11. How are you doing, dude?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good.
Awesome. Jeff, at Real Jeff Simmons. It does feel like it's been a little while since we've talked. What's going on with you, dude?
Not too much, man. There's a storm going on outside, so if you lose me, it's not my internet's fault. But I actually did get a new company to do my internet. It's been great. So
you have better internet than Russell Wilson. Did you know
that? That was a great tweet, by the way, Evan.
I don't even remember what I tweeted, but I'll accept it.
Basically what you just said.
Okay.
I think you said I was in rural Canada and some people got literally upset. They missed the bit.
I mean, to be fair, I think of Canada as just like one big forest and you're somewhere in there.
Toronto is very American. Toronto is very different than Canada where I live.
Awesome.
Interesting.
But yeah.
This is a fascinating conversation. We're off to a running start here.
Yeah, I gotta say, you guys were really good the other day. I'm not just saying that. I know I've said this. I was expecting like a very heated, fiery post-game show based on Brian being at the game and drinking, and Evan and Nathan being at the game. You guys were very rational. I was blown away by that. It was a very smart, and
that's what we're known for, being smart and rational.
I know.
Right?
It was a very good conversation. I kind of needed that. I was pissed off on Sunday.
Yeah, it was. I think I saw it coming. Part of it. I mean, it was like for, this is gonna date me, but I do that all the time. I don't really care. But that scene in Austin Powers where the what is it, the truck? What kind of truck is it? It's like something moving incredibly slowly. and
Will Ferrell's yelling,
and he's yelling for like 45 minutes and finally gets run over. It was a little bit like that, I even saw some ridiculous debate going on Twitter with a bunch of hoo-has about whether Derrick Henry destroyed us or not. Like, what a stupid discussion, to be totally honest. Like,
gee, I wonder who started that.
Yeah, I wonder.
I mean, like, why? Like, yeah, he had a 60-yard run. He was like a huge part of how they won. And the Seahawks played him wonderfully for most of that game. Like, I went back just to double check because, and then chose not to get involved with that stupid discussion. Would it surprise you to know that in the last 2 years, no team has held Derrick Henry to more rushes or a higher percentage of his rushes that were 3 yards or less than the Seahawks did in that game? Or that no team has held Derrick Henry to more rushes of 0 yards or loss than the Seahawks did in that game? So, like, the Seahawks did some remarkably good things against Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry got them. So this idea that Derrick Henry just waxed the Seahawks is horseshit.
So you're on my side.
Oh my God. But no, it's not his side.
I thought you were going to shit all over me.
It is ridiculous to say that he waxed the Seahawks, and it's ridiculous to say that the Seahawks, controlled him. Like, they both got some. But I think it would be hard for most teams to play Derrick Henry better than the Seahawks did on Sunday. So I'm more on that point of view than the other.
Did you know that he supposedly is known for having like an absolute dump truck of a butt.
God damn it.
Did you guys know that? There's literally Derrick Henry butt accounts, like Sam Hawk Badger, but for Derrick Henry's butt.
So, anyways,
well, that's what the conversation turned into. I had to close the loop.
No, I don't think it was turning into that, Evan. You turned it into that. There was no direction where it was heading there. Like I don't. Yeah.
All right, I'll let us move on.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think I did want to spend the first few minutes of the pod tonight talking about that game before we get into looking forward. I'm curious, with a few days under your belts, any points of view. And Jeff, I want to start with you since you weren't on the post game show. What were your thoughts on that game?
I'm still almost irritated by what happened. I just think it was a collective failure from so many different levels. But I think big picture, what was so frustrating is what we talked about last week, how repeatable and how encouraging that first game was. And basically everything we saw in the first 6 quarters of the season was great. But then the last 2 quarters, they became basically everything that concerned us all offseason. Everything that almost every single thing we talked about almost came to a head in that second half, where I thought Nathan made a fantastic point on the show where, like, even Russell, where you want to see him be a little different, learn some new things, use the middle of the field. And you saw all those things the coaches did in the first game to unlock the whole field for him. And he just reverted back to the guy we saw at the end of the year last year, where it was big play or nothing. And between him and DK and Bobby and the coaches making a lot of weird decisions between the pass rush rotations and how they didn't use the motion and deception on offense, I just found the whole thing dumbfounding. It was very frustrating because they clearly used a repeatable formula in those first 6 quarters. And that second half, just everything we saw last year that was bad almost came to a head between quarterback and center and D-line. And it was just irritating. And Jamal Adams and every debate we had on him, and almost everything came up in that half. So it was like a punch to the gut almost.
Yeah. I felt like a little bit like, I don't know. This is a horrible comparison, especially like as someone who has known people with addiction in their lives in various states. But it's the one that comes to mind, so I'm going to say it anyway. But it's like when you know somebody who's got a substance problem and they're looking like they may have kicked it, and then they fall off the wagon. And it's like you're gutted for them, you're gutted for you, like you wanted better for them, but you're not surprised that they're back to what they have fallen into before. That's kind of how I left feeling that game. And that's kind of how I felt. Like, it wasn't surprising. It was like, yeah, I've seen this before. And I left feeling like, I felt this way about Russell before. I felt this way about the offensive game plan before. I felt this way about the run game before. I felt this way about the pass rush before and the defense. Like, there wasn't a lot where I was like, oh, that was new. Even this notion of the first time that they lose a 15-point lead at home in like ever. Well, they've been doing shit like that the last couple of years now. So like, it just felt shittily familiar.
Yeah.
So like, Nathan, if there was one thing you walked away from that game where you say, okay, this was the most encouraging thing out of that game, and one thing from that game that you walked away most discouraging, what would your answer be to those 2 questions?
I mean, for discouraging, I don't think my answers really changed. It's really about, Russell Wilson's growth, what Waldron may bring to this offense that's different, right? We didn't see that in this game. And we're not even seeing them try a lot of it, which is maybe the most concerning part of that. I mean, encouraging, I think it's also what I said in the post game show. I picked them to win 11 games and win a playoff game. I had them losing this game because the Titans offense is really, really good. They have Derrick Henry and Julio Jones and AJ Brown and Ryan Tannehill. So losing a super close shootout at home with some weird stuff in terms of penalties, like the one thing that I do know what you mean by like a lot of this kind of felt like deja vu, or that you could see it coming. The penalties, even with a Pete Carroll team and all the ways that they have penalties, this was not a characteristic of a Pete Carroll team in the boneheadedness of some of it, the attitude of some of it. And so to lose a super close game to what I thought was a good team, a game I thought they were going to lose anyways, like that's the positive. They looked good against a good team and they just barely lost with some stupid stuff mixed in. It's not that terrible of a loss all in all.
Same question to you, Evan. Most encouraging, most discouraging. And I'll give you one thing for me, like the most discouraging was actually the pass rush. That was like, and the pass rush wasn't horrible overall. I mean, Alton Robinson had a strip sack, huge play. Like there was the big sack at the end of the fourth, or 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter from, was it Al Woods? No. No, it was Al Woods.
Yeah,
Kerry Hyder like had a big play. Like anyway, like there were some good moments, but considering who they were going against, I just was like, it's going to sound super dramatic, but I was crestfallen. Like I was so excited to have a consistently good pass rush, just eat against a shitty offensive line at home for the first time in like over a year with fans. Like I thought it was just going to be like party time, and it was just not that. So that was my most discouraging thing in that game.
Yeah.
That's funny. Oh, go ahead, Evan.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a rant to go on. So Nathan, do you want to jump in first?
I was just saying, I kind of disagree with that quite a bit, actually. I think between the talent at receiver and the lack of talent at corner and how they loaded up, right, to stop the run, given LJ Collier a lot of snaps, I think the pass rush was fine. I thought it was nothing. I definitely wasn't disappointed or disappointed.
Before you
See,
go on,
I was going to say, I was disappointed initially, but then
Yeah.
when you saw the snaps, it almost seemed, I found the rotations really weird during the game. And then when we saw Benson Mayo had 48 snaps, Alton Robinson had 12 snaps.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor barely played. They went so heavy, and Collier and Kemdiche didn't play the week before, were 25, 30 snaps. So I just found the rotations, they went so in on stopping Henry. They almost went away from their own strength. And
I got to jump in, and then I want to make sure Evan gets his rant in before Arif joins in here. I agree with both of what you and Nathan just said. So we're not actually as far apart as it might sound like. Part of why I'm discouraged is because it's become clear that the Seahawks have a very distinct plan for how they're going to stop the run and the priority of that, and how they're going to stop the pass. And it's very rotation based and package based. And that is something that Tennessee in week 2 already figured out how to game plan around by going muddle huddle and not allowing them to rotate in pass rushers and keep the base package on the field. Like, it drives me crazy that Carlos Dunlap is not part of the base package, or someone who's a better pass rusher is not part of the base package. I think that that's a real flaw in the strategy. So anyway, go on, Evan.
Yeah, I'll start with the positive. I think Alton Robinson continues to make plays on like a per snap basis. He is, I don't know, making a lot of plays on a per snap basis. So I think he's a young talent to keep an eye on, and hopefully, gets an increase in playing time. But guys, the more I've been thinking about this game this past week, and I tweeted this out, the more disappointed I am with DK Metcalf. Not just from this game, actually through 2 weeks. He's here's the thing. To be an alpha receiver like he is, I get it. You got to talk shit. You got to impose your will. I get all of that, and that's all cool, and I support all of that, but you got to be dominating. It felt erratic. It felt undisciplined. and it felt like he was lashing out in frustration instead of being strategic in his shit talk, I guess you could say. He's been absent for like 6 of 8 quarters through 2 weeks. I get it. He's a third-year receiver, and out of third-year receivers, he's good. But for relative to our our hopes and our expectations for him, he has got to play better mentally, physically. We need him to be a leader on this team. And frankly, I was really disappointed with his performance on Sunday.
Yeah, I want to go. We've got our guest here. I'm going to let him in. I'm going to drop a super hot and probably a horrible take, but I'm gonna drop it anyway, and then we'll come back to it. I was a little bit disappointed to find out that DK was not on the injury report in a meaningful way. Not because I was hoping that he was hurt, but my interpretation of that game was he was not playing well. Things were going wrong. And then it felt like he started like really making sure people knew he was hurt. Like that's what it felt like, that he wanted people to know, like, yeah, this is because I'm hurt. And so for then it to turn out that maybe he wasn't that hurt, like it's just a bad look. It was a really disappointing game for how he conducted himself. And yeah. We will talk about that in more detail, but before we do, let's bring in our first guest of the year, someone who, deserves far more high-class company than he's going to get this evening. And we had this discussion, and a good show and a good host would have had this discussion with me beforehand. I've only known you on Twitter, so we've never, I don't know if we have talked live, but I've known you in my head as Arif Hasan. Is that the correct pronunciation before we go on?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
No, that's not please tell us what the correct pronunciation.
No, you got it. That's what I go by. It's just if you ever go to like an Arabic speaking country or a Muslim dominant country, that's not how they're going to pronounce it, but that's how I pronounce it. So you're fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, I appreciate it. It's important to me that we actually, because Evan, if you don't know this about Evan, pronounces every name incorrectly. So
that does not shock me at all.
I was convinced it was Arif before you joined.
Oh, perfect. Okay. No one pronounces it like that. That's great. That's
classic.
Good. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the show, Arif. It's been a long and storied history with you and the Seahawks. And for a lot of people, they think of you as part of Seahawks Twitter. As part of your welcoming in, would you tell the audience here and the folks that don't know you how you became like a quasi like official member of Seahawks Twitter?
Okay, well, the short version of the long story is no idea was against my will. The longer version is, God, this goes all the way back to like 2013. So this is like ancient internet time, right? Back when the Seahawks traded for Percy Harvin and then later signed Kevin Williams and later signed Antoine Winfield, I wrote a couple of stories for Field Goals back when Danny Kelly was running it. And by the time I wrote the third story, which I believe was the Antoine Winfield story, I think he was the final one of that group, which is great because he got like cut, right? Like it didn't matter. But by that time, people were like, "Oh, I mean, you just write about the Seahawks now," and like, it was kind of a funny joke at that time. And they were all like really long stories, right? Like they were like, I like compared Kevin Williams to like a RAV4. I called Antoine Winfield a linebacker. Like they were just like meandering, like Jackson Bevan style, like just forever stories, right? And I mean, the fact that I was able to say that, I think, is maybe a bit of brain poisoning by itself. But yeah, I mean, like that was kind of the thing. And so they like made fun of it. And then like somebody was like, "Hey, we should just bring him to Seattle for a game." And I was like, "Look, I'm not going to turn down like a free trip," because at the time I wasn't like working for anybody that would cover travel. I wasn't covering, the team in a credential capacity, right? So I was like, "Look, if you do this, I'll go, right? Like if you cover my expenses, I'm down." And so like they did that. And so I went to Seattle. I went to a spot where there were 3 Starbucks on the same intersection. I went to a real coffee shop. I of course went to the fish place, Pike's something, right? Also, the guy that talked to me, I was there for like half an hour. The guy talked to me forever, right? That guy ruled. He like hooked me up on like some discount super fresh crab on the way back. Like that place rocks. Like I know that Seattle fans get really annoyed every time on Monday Night Football they use it in the bumpers. Nah, that place rules. So yeah, and then the story just keeps going because the more I resist it, the more fun it is to talk about. And so people will keep poking at it, and I'll keep on insisting I don't really care that much for or against the Seahawks. And people are like, well, that's funny. Let's keep it going. If I had embraced it, the bit probably would have died, honestly. So the fact that it just kept going, like, I think that that's like part of it. So that's the longer version of the story. And now I'm like permanently ensconced in it. Plus, I mean, like, I feel like my Twitter presence is like fun enough, right? Like, not to toot my own horn, but like enough people follow me. I feel like I can say that like, it's just kind of like a fun set of interactions. Plus, I like complain about it a lot. Like, not just that I resist it, but I complain about it a lot. Like the time like 8 million Baby Yoda avatars showed up in my mentions. Like it's a good bit. I mean, I hated it, but it's like, you know, game recognizes game. That's a great bit.
That was one of my favorite moments in Seahawks Twitter history.
The only redeeming part of Baby Yoda was you getting 1 million Baby Yoda mentions.
Yeah, honestly, right? Well, like the thing is, when Baby Yoda, like, as if we don't mind talking about media for half a second, when Baby Yoda started, it was like, great. It's like, here's an adorable thing that's like engineered by scientists for people to love it, right? And then they were like, by the way, it's called Grogu. And it just went downhill from there. Like every media aspect of it, like, and season 2 wasn't as good as season 1. It was fine. But like, you know, it just goes downhill. And then there's like the overabundance of the meme. Yeah. So like, that's probably the highlight of the Baby Yoda phenomena from like a Twitter perspective, at least from my viewpoint.
I concur. And before we actually turn our attention to actually talking about this upcoming game, and since you've just established your Seahawks credentials, tell us a little bit about, you know, how you became a Vikings fan and you know, covering them, and also talk to us a little bit about the cause that you'd like people to be aware of tonight, because we want to make sure we get a chance to point people in the right direction there.
It's gonna take me a little second to find the link, so let's see if I can if I can, you know, multitask, right? So originally I was not that big of a football guy. Like I wasn't into football in high school. I was on the debate team. My best friend was the center on our football team, and I made fun of it constantly, right? Like it was just like a thing where you know, I was like, look, we're both nerds. What are you doing here? And when I went to college, you know, I tried joining the debate team. You know, the first year they didn't have one. The second year they started the debate team, and one of the people helping us get it started was like, well, to be on this debate team, you have to join the fantasy football league. And I was like, well, that's silly. And I didn't really think about it. And then I get an email saying that I've been like signed up for a fantasy football team, and that the draft is going to be like next week or something like that, maybe in 2 weeks. Right. And I was like, well, my name is attached, my name is attached to it. I can't lose. And so I did research, right? I was like, okay, I can't go down, right? Like I want to win. And so I did research and I drafted a pretty decent team. Ended up like third in the league that year or whatever. But that year I got like crazy into it. It helped that it was like 2009. So it was like the Favre year where he just went off like 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in the regular season. And you know, that just hooks you, right? Like after like that win against San Francisco, I'm sure Seahawks fans remember that too. To Greg Lewis in the end zone, like that's addictive, right? So followed that, and by the time 2011 rolled around, so in 2010 I ended up winning the league because I accidentally drafted Mike Vick. Great move. And so by 2011, like I'd already won the league, right? So like I am bought in. I'm like, I know about football and I love football. Let's see what people have to say about football. And at the time I was just like, yeah, I don't really like how people talk about it. So I wrote a couple of articles talking about my problems with, or I should say blog posts about my problems with the way sports media was running things. And they got promoted to the top of the daily, so part of the SB Nation family, the Daily Norseman front page. And then they asked me to be on their front page and write about them like on a more consistent basis. And I was like, yeah, man, I could do that. Sure. And then someone told me like, hey, Arif, you should like look into doing this like professionally. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird, but I mean, I like making money. And at the time I wasn't making very much money at all. I was in politics. I was working 80 hours a week. I was making under 25 a year. It was awful. It was terrible. And so I quit that, and I had some savings from some other stuff built up beforehand. Super lucky, very privileged, very happy about that. And because of that, I was able to take a job at the Bleacher Report, and then from there I just kind of worked my way up. And I didn't get credentialed until I was with The Athletic, which was 3 years ago in August. So I just hit my 3-year anniversary last month, and I've been living the dream. This is the best job on the planet for someone like me. I love it. So that's how I got into all of it. I don't know what else to say. It's fantastic.
That's a great story. I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure you get the same messages of people, kids in college, high school, wanting to know how to get started. And I think hearing those stories are super important, so people can kind of know how non-linear it can be.
Oh, everyone's route is different. The only thing that anyone has in common is that they wrote a lot. That's it.
Yep, absolutely. And tell us about the Lavender Rights Project.
Yeah. So if you want to donate using the promotion we're just going to mention, I'll mention the link at the top here, talk about it, mention the link at the bottom. So the way to get matching funds, so to maximize your donation, is to use one of the bit.ly links. So bit.ly/LRP B-Day, as in birthday, B-Day 2021. And you go there, you can either donate directly through Facebook, which is what links you, or there's a post there that links you directly to their site. Both of those will lead to matching funds. So to talk about the Lavender Rights Project real quick, they service the Tacoma, Seattle area by providing a number of services and workshops for trans youth in that area. And in particular, they've recently begun to focus on an underrepresented and an underserved part of that community, within that community, which is already significantly underserved, which is Black and Indigenous trans youth in the Tacoma, Seattle area. And so they have done stuff like provide legal services. And so that includes things like, defending them in court, name change services. It also means, fighting against various types of discrimination. We've only very recently been able to pass federal law that bars certain types, not all kinds, but certain types of discrimination against trans people or people because of their gender identity. There's also they've also started something called the Black Trans Task Force, which is at the moment it's probably going to do a lot of things, but at the moment it's focused on finding ways to create new housing, income adjusted housing, so people only ever pay 30% of what their income is. New housing for people for Black and people of color, trans people within the Seattle area. So I was able to talk to their executive director and a couple of other people over the past couple of years. They've been great. They're fantastic people, and they've been able to secure matching funds this year for their 5th birthday, which is this week, which also happens to be the week right before my birthday on the 27th. So this is really great news. And so if people could give to the Lavender Rights Project in honor of what other people in Seahawks are calling a Reef Week, which is a weird thing for me to say, right? Like, hey, it's a Reef Week, odd. But in honor of the Vikings Seahawks lead up to that week, if they could give to that and be able to maximize their giving through the matching funds bit. So they match funds up to 50%. So if you give $20, the matching organizations give $10 up to that amount. So if you give $40, it's $10. If you give $50, it's $10. So they can maximize the number of people who are able to take advantage of the matching funds. And again, that link is bit.ly, so bit.ly/LRPBday, as in birthday, 2021, bit.ly/LRPBday 2021.
And just for folks, it's in the chat and also on my timeline, and I think most of the folks in the pod's timeline, so you can find it in any of those spots. All right, let's talk football. Jeff, kick us off.
Sure. So obviously it is a Reef Week, so I'll start off with that. It does feel like the Seahawks and Vikings play every year. So obviously you're very invested in Seahawks Twitter and you have a lot of relationships, but let me ask you this. What's your current perception from where you sit of where the Seahawks are now? And I know if you ask 10 different Seahawks fans, you'll get wildly different answers. So how do you view them from where you sit?
Good, not great, which is I imagine frustrating because they've been great. Um, and they're a completely different team from what they used to be, which makes it very difficult for people to talk about them, both in terms of the level of quality and the way that they play. They blitz a lot more now, especially because they have Jamal Adams. But the last 2 years, they've blitzed a lot more on defense. The defensive identity has changed. It's no longer a stale cover three, which was very fresh and new when, 2013, 2015, right? So that's the defensive stuff. Offensively, obviously, they're throwing it a little bit more. They're throwing it early in games a little bit more. The defensive personnel, obviously, and the offensive personnel have changed. The offensive line's a little bit better. Russ is taking advantage of that by holding onto the ball a little bit longer, but that leads to more explosive plays. Very much an explosive play focused team, right? DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett takes advantage of broken plays a lot more than they used to, just because they occur more often because Russ is holding onto the ball more. That kind of stuff. So they still want to have an identity reminiscent of a run first team, and they still will run the ball a lot, right? Condensed formation. So there were a lot of comparisons in Vikings media between Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, and those comparisons are very fair. They're both very escapable quarterbacks. Dalvin Tomlinson today talked about some of the differences between the two within those similarities. So like Russell Wilson's more likely to step up into the pocket. Kyler Murray's more likely to get out into the flats, that kind of stuff. But the offenses are different because Arizona wants to spread it out. They've got 4 receivers on the field. The Seahawks are like, no, we've got 2 good receivers. We're good. It doesn't matter that we don't have a tight end. We'll put 3 on the field. It doesn't matter. That kind of stuff. So that's my perception of the Seahawks. They're a good team. They're more offense forward than I think the coaches want them to be, but that's who they are. And the defense has to have ramped up the pressure, and they're doing that with a little bit more blitzing. Not like Baltimore level blitzing, but much more blitzing than when they were a cover 3 team.
So as you're probably aware, we stole Sean McVay's boy, Shane Waldron, this offseason. If you were Shane Waldron entering this week, how do you attack the Vikings defense? What areas are weak, potential for exploitation?
Yeah, the corners aren't fast. There's not a fast corner, right? And like the Seahawks have a pair of very fast receivers, right? One of them is quick, one of them isn't, but they're both very fast. And Patrick Peterson, Bashad Breeland, they're just not speed guys. Mackenzie Alexander in the slot, not a speed guy. There's not a speed corner on the roster. And so that's that. I mean, I would just take advantage of that, right? If the Seahawks have the capability of extending plays, and they do, like Russ is holding onto the ball a lot less his time in pocket is less than it has been, I think, ever. But, it's been 2 weeks. That might even out. But, he's getting rid of the ball faster. It's still longer than most of the rest of the league, but it's much faster than it used to be. Take advantage of that. Hold on to the ball longer. The Vikings have 2 pass rushers. One of them is a nose tackle, and the other one's a Neil Hunter. So if you can block them up, right, you're probably fine. Get rid of the ball late enough in the process that Lockett or Metcalf is going to beat their guy. Obviously, the Vikings are going to adjust to that. They're going to move their safeties around. They might play more cover 4 than they have recently. All of those things change. But I think the beginning of that game plan is to take advantage of how much the speed advantage they have at receiver.
How is just real quick, one follow-up. How has Patrick Peterson looked through 2 weeks?
He's looked fine. I think he's looked actually kind of above average, which was kind of my prediction. The Vikings would adjust what they were doing because Arizona was misusing him last 2 years.
Yeah.
He looks fine, but he hasn't been tested very much, in part because Bashad Breeland has been struggling a lot. So other teams have been throwing against him. But, the Cardinals want to throw to DeAndre Hopkins, and Patrick Peterson was on DeAndre Hopkins all the time. They only had 4 targets, right? So within that scope, he actually looked pretty good. Hopkins has hit below his receiving over under in that game. He's hit below his career average. Right now, he's the 3rd most targeted target on the Cardinals offense, which is very unusual. He was the most targeted receiver as a percentage in all of last year for any receiver in football. So they want to target him and they didn't. So he's, from that perspective, he's playing fine, but a lot of it is because they just throw it up Bashad Breeland.
So related on the corner stuff, since you brought that up, what's going on with Cam Dantzler? And he's
bad. He
got 16 snaps in this game. Why? And is that going to increase or what's going on there?
So it was kind of a glib answer that he's bad, but so not only did he lose, so there's a starting competition between him and Breeland in camp. He lost that competition, which was fair because Breeland actually looked really good in camp. Like the struggles that we're seeing in the regular season are somewhat surprising, given how great he looked in the preseason, -1 Tyreek Hill play, how great he looked in camp. And he's gone up against like Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. He went up against KJ Hamler and Jerry Jeudy. Like in camp, he was going up against good receivers and he looked good. Dancer didn't. And so he lost the starting job. But it's not just that. He also lost the backup job to Chris Boyd. Like, he was just so inconsistent that the Vikings would rather have Chris Boyd out there. And the Vikings put Chris Boyd out there more often in the preseason and the regular season ahead of Dancer. The only reason Dancer even was active for the game, he was inactive week one. The reason he was active for this game is because Harrison Hand, their backup nickel corner, was injured, and now he's on the COVID list, so Dancer was going to be active again regardless. But he was injured, and so they needed Dancer, and they were like, well, Dancer has to play special teams even though he doesn't. That's the reason he was inactive the week before, in part. And so, we saw a couple of injuries to Breland in the game. I think he had 2 injuries in the game. And that led to both Boyd and Dancer playing a little bit. And in the game, Dancer played lights out. So we'll see kind of how that translates in, going forward. My understanding, and, we don't get to watch practice anymore like we did in training camp. My understanding is that Dancer has still struggled in practices. And that's going to kind of define what's happening going forward. But after, it's only 16 snaps, but after a really good 16 snaps on a couple of targets, that's probably going to be in consideration if Breland continues to struggle.
So before the pod, we were kind of joking around about Mike Zimmer and his future and kind of what's going on there. We were saying that, basically the Vikings are the Seahawks if the Seahawks had Kirk Cousins instead of Russell Wilson. I guess one, do you kind of think, is that a fair way to think of the Vikings? And, Seahawks fans, like you said, they were great. Now they're just more good. A lot of frustration, a lot of discussion around Pete Carroll and is he the right choice going forward? With Zimmer, maybe his job security being a little up in the air, do you think he is the right coach longer term, or do you think that a change is going to need to be made there?
I think that there's something to that. Like, if you compared the Vikings 2017 defense to the Seahawks 2015 defense, I mean, the Seahawks probably come out ahead, but like it's pretty close, I think, just in terms of effectiveness. Obviously, the schemes are different, but that's not what you asked. If they had Russell Wilson instead of Kirk Cousins in 20, or I guess Case Keenum in 2017, they probably beat the Eagles. They make the Super Bowl. They might win. I don't know. So there's probably something there. Both run forward coaches. The Vikings were a little bit more aggressive about using play action with the Kubiaks, that they had. But yeah, very similar, right? Like, feels outdated, loves to run the ball. Pete Carroll is a little bit more poke the bear in terms of making fun of the analytics people, not like necessarily intentionally, but like he'll talk about the rule of 53.
It's intentional. It's 100% intentional.
Oh, okay. Well then, yeah, sure. He'll talk about the rule of 53, and Zimmer's just like, yeah, you just run the ball to win. I don't know what's the deal. It's to him, it's just like, that's what you do. I don't need a number, right? That sort of thing. But philosophically, there's some similarities. Zimmer defensively, I think, is a lot more adaptive and more hands-on, right, than Pete Carroll. Obviously more hands-on, but like the defense evolves every single year. It's like bleeding edge defensive stuff. Like, it's not Brandon Staley like lights ahead, right, or light years ahead, but it's incredible like what he does with the changing personnel and how people adapt to his rules. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of similarities. I think that both teams have extremely weird things happen to them all the time, especially in games. I think but the difference is that with the Seahawks, the weird things just kind of turn out usually. Like the games that go like bizarre, you're just like, well, yeah, but at least we won, right? With the Vikings, it's just like, they get this again. Like, they lose the weird games, like not always, but like 90% of the time it feels like, right? Like, they'll have a Minneapolis Miracle, but they'll also have like a shank at the bank, right? Like, it's just, the weird games are bad. That's like, with the Seahawks, you could just be like, yeah, we're weird. It's cool. We got a ring. And with the Vikings, it's like, yeah, it's pain again. This one's new. This pain is new. This one feels more like a serrated knife, like a bread knife. I don't know why I put on like a voice there, but like, that's how I feel.
That's great. And actually it resonates. I have a couple of questions for you. One's just a nuts and bolts. So Dalvin Cook, obviously a key part of the Vikings attack, did get injured in the game against the Cardinals, left, came back, left again with an ankle issue, and then did not practice today. What's your understanding of his situation heading into this game?
The expectation, from my understanding, right? The expectation is that he'll be playing, right? That could change, obviously, as practices continue and as recovery goes at a different schedule than maybe what they anticipate. But the expectation is that he'll play. The first injury was just a stinger, came back. The second injury was the ankle issue that popped up on the injury report. So they think he'll play. Obviously, if you watch the game after he came back from the ankle injury, he just did not look as explosive. He did not look as quick. And I think that played a role, right? Like, I think that, there's like a 30-yard run waiting for him and he wasn't able to take advantage of it, sort of thing. But I think that they anticipate him playing. They love playing him. Like, Alexander Madison is not bad. And they were just like, but why would we have him on the field? This guy's good for 30.
Yep. Well, the Seahawks certainly have had their share of running backs in the last week. So the other question I had for you is, looking at the Vikings team, something that stuck out to me was the left side of their line seems like a disaster, all the way maybe even through to their center. Talk to us a little bit about pass protection for the Vikings. And Kirk Cousins has been excellent so far, so he seems to have been able to, manage it, but they do struggle quite a bit on third down, and I assume some of that has to do with pass protection.
So first thing, this is probably the best Vikings offensive line we've seen in a decade. Like if you're 100% correct, and I'll talk about some of the nuances there about the left side of the line being a disaster, that's fine. It's better, right? Like, so there's that, right? Second thing is, actually, I think the left guard is quite good. Ezra Cleveland has played pretty well. He had a bad moment in week one, bad moment or two in week one. Had played a really good game last week. Had a couple of mistakes that were both in the run game. Not really that concerned about it. Rashad Hill is interesting because if you took like 5 random snaps from those 2 games and looked at him, you'd be like, yeah, it's a pretty good tackle. And then like his bad snaps are catastrophically bad, right? They're like sack in 1.2 seconds bad. It's just like the preseason sack he gave up to Kwity Paye, the biggest mistakes that he made against the Bengals, the holding penalties. So, which is like kind of the name of the game of an offensive lineman. It's like you remember more for your mistakes than your successes. But there is some degree of variance, right? Because if you give up immediate pressure, that changes things a little bit more than if you give up pressure over the long time or over a longer period of time, or if you misjudge where the quarterback is in the pocket, or, something along those lines. So for the most part, when you see him play and you take a look at kind of what a pass rusher is doing to him, you don't think that pass rusher is getting stonewalled or anything like that, but you're not overly worried as an offensive line watcher, right? If you're watching the offense until it happens. And then it's just something that's just bad, right? I suspect what's happening is that on downs where pass rushers want to break out their most successful move, or the move that they see is available to them based off of their film study, that's when they break it out. And he doesn't really have much of a counter to it. It's kind of like when, what's his name? Adrian Claiborne got Chaz Green for like 6 sacks. It was just like, yeah, I saw a thing. He just kept working. So I just did it again, never stopped it. I think it's kind of like that, where it's like Rashad Hill has a critical mistake or two that the defensive linemen are picking up on. Garrett Bradbury continues to be bad at pass protection. Had some really great moments in the run game. Don't care. He's bad at pass protection. Some of it is strength issues. Like he'll just get forklifted, right?
We have no familiarity with centers that can't pass protect or get over.
right.
Okay, keep going.
I don't know. Like Poona Ford is like a weird. I mean, obviously he's like 5'10", right? But like he's like a weird guy to figure out. Like he's strong, but like sometimes I just don't know if like that strength translates to a particular center or not, right? Like if Michael Pierce goes up against Garrett Bradbury, he's strong and he's 360 pounds. I think he's listed at 335. He's 360. So I know that he's going to overwhelm Garrett Bradbury, right? But like if Bradbury and Bradbury wants to move him in the run game, he's not going to be able to. He has to move and get up to the second level and take on a linebacker, right? With Poona Ford, I don't know, right? Like he's strong. He's stronger than a lot of 310-pound guys, and he might like forklift Garrett Bradbury in pass protection. Garrett Bradbury might overwhelm him. I have no idea how that's going to go down. I don't suspect it's going to be great, but that's kind of it. On the right side of the line, Oli Udoh has been fantastic. Brown and Neal has actually not been great, but that's relative to him. He's a good right tackle. The first 3 years that he's had in the league were fantastic. Last year was a bit of a down year. This year I would characterize as a bit of a down year, but down year for him is better than the Vikings offensive line has ever been able to secure. So Yeah, right side of the line is a little bit better than the left, but I do think Ezra Cleveland is playing well.
Got it. That's super helpful. So you've answered a ton for us. Give us a bunch to think about and chew on. Before we let you go, what's your expectation of what happens in this game? How are you seeing this game unfold?
I normally I just kind of default to a Seahawks win here, just because A, the Seahawks beat them like 7 times in a row. B, they've got the better quarterback, and that's usually a pretty good heuristic. I actually think the Vikings have a chance here, not just because they're at home. I'm going to predict a Vikings win, maybe against the odds. Watching that Tennessee game, and maybe it's a 1-game sample, who knows? I thought that in that first half, like, aside from the fact that they were successfully stopping Derrick Henry, I thought that was pretty skillful, for a while, obviously. I thought in that first half, the Seahawks were getting lucky, and then they paid for it later in the fourth quarter, right? I don't know if that's going to hold up, right? Like an AJ Brown drop, a weird Julio Jones call in the, who knows, right? So I think that defense is a little worse off than what the statistics show. And the Vikings offense is, frankly, it's rolling. So, and that's with Justin Jefferson having like a 15% drop rate, which I don't expect to continue. So I think that the Vikings offense will be able to hang. And I think with, the kind of the home field advantage, the fact that the defense seems to be like average to below average, I'm going to call a Vikings win by like a small amount. Obviously, it's going to be a weird game. 2 weird teams are involved. But I'm going to say it's a Vikings win. And, honestly, that's just more interesting for me to write about a 1-2 team versus an 0-3 team.
Certainly is. Hey, Arif, it has been great having you on. And for folks that missed it earlier, it's Arif week on Seahawks Twitter, and there is a worthy cause that he's promoting, the Lavender Rights Project. The link is in the chat and it's on our timeline. Give Arif a follow. And I should have just had this ready, but let me make sure I've got it. It is at Arif, ARIFHASAN NFL. Again, at ARIFHASN NFL. Arif, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
All right. So that was Arif Hasan telling us a little bit about the Vikings. Anything jump out to you guys and what you heard? Anything that surprised you? Anything that encouraged you? Anything that discouraged you based on what you heard? Jeff?
I was a little surprised how much he thought the Vikings offense was rolling. I thought they had a terrible first game. I watched that Bengals game where they lost in overtime and they couldn't get out of their own way. And it was a lot of offensive line. I think their first 3 snaps of the year were false starts. So the last game against Arizona, I do agree that they look great. They should have easily beat Arizona. And Arizona's now everyone talks about Kyler Murray. They didn't miss a field goal. It was 37 yards. They win the game. So I was a little surprised to hear him say that, but no, I thought everything that I know a lot of people in Toronto that are Vikings fans. And for whatever reason, maybe it's Randy Moss, just like 3 of the guys I talk to the most about football are all Vikings fans. So I've been hearing about that team. Not only do we play them every year, and these guys just hate Kirk Cousins. They can't stand him. They're just waiting for him to leave. And like they can barely watch their team. So I'm very interested. I'm always curious to see how he plays because he's so up and down. He's never beat Russell Wilson in the NFL. So like he's got a good offense. They're a different offense this year. They're more 3 receiver than 2 tight end. They're a big 11 personnel team now. And Justin Jefferson's been their 3rd best receiver so far this year, which is quite odd. He was one of the best players in the league last year. So it's a big game for the Seattle secondary, which did not look good last game.
Yeah, well, it's funny. You look at the numbers for the Vikings guys. Kirk Cousins is thrown for 600 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's completing 72% of his passes. Dalvin Cook has almost 200 yards rushing, averaging almost, over 4.5 yards a carry. You've got Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen that everybody already knows. And then they got a new guy, KJ Osborne, who's a rookie, who's actually leading them in receiving yards, 167 yards through 2 games. And so, Adam Thielen already has 3 touchdowns. That offense, I mean, there's a lot of good numbers there. But then there's this weird thing where the Vikings offense, like, is top 10 in most things, but they're 31st in third down percentage. And so it's like,
Sounds familiar.
it's weird, right? It's weird. I mean, Nathan, when you look at the Vikings and you have some idea, like their defense is actually like not doing so hot either. They're almost the opposite of their offense. They're pretty much dead last in everything except that they are second in the league in third down percentage against. And second in the league in sack percentage. What are the matchups like? How do you see the Seahawks matching up with this Vikings team?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like Arif, heaped some pretty heavy praise on Zimmer as a defensive mind, and I definitely see a lot of that, and I get that, but it does also feel like they've been holding together some pretty poor talent with duct tape and band-aids and stuff. So his assessment of the offensive line made me pretty confident. To have that many guys that were question marks against this team with all of the pass rushers, and he focused on Puna and what Puna maybe they'll do as a pass rusher. I think the bigger problem, if he can get out there and is healthy, is going to be Brian Monet. I feel like we've seen him be fairly dominant in the first 2 weeks. And so he could give that center, he's given a lot of people some problems right now. So hopefully he's healthy and can get out there and take advantage of that. So yeah, I mean, I don't see a lot to be really scared of. That offense is good enough probably to not let it get run away on him. But this one, if they lose, the concern meter is going to move a lot further than it did last week.
Interesting. Evan, I see you nodding your head. Why?
Yeah, I just think the NFC West is so insanely razor thin. There's some tough matchups this weekend in our division. I think the Packers play the Niners, the Cards play the Jags, and the Rams play
the Bucks.
Yeah. So it's not inconceivable that the Niners and the Rams could both lose their games, which would put Seattle tied in second place. I'm assuming that the Cards beat the Jags. So I don't even remember what your question was, but literally the NFC West is so tight that these games matter. It was weird. Last week, none of the NFC West teams looked particularly good. In fact, I thought most of them looked pretty underwhelming. The Niners looked like garbage.
Numbers that Shield pointed out today, like they were pathetic.
Hey man, he actually had a really high completion percentage, and
I was watching that game.
I think
he could not complete a screen pass. It was
Jeff. We're trying to protect Trey Lance. Okay, this is about protecting a young man.
2-0. Why would you change quarterbacks?
Yeah,
this is 49ers talk. I'm going to stop this. So I got to ask, guys, compare the Vikings to the Titans. Tell me, compare and contrast. Where are the Vikings different than the Titans? I'll kind of cue it up. You've got a good quarterback. Some would call Kirk Cousins mediocre, but he's above average. You've got at least a pair of elite receivers. You've got a elite running back. You've got a questionable offensive line. You've got a mediocre defense. What I see as the difference is that the Vikings actually have better talent on defense. At least you still have a Harrison Smith and a what's the other safety? What's his name? The good one. I'll look it up. But you've got Daniel Hunter, you've got Michael Pierce, you've got Eric Kendricks. Like there is some talent that the Titans don't have. So I look at this and I'm like, this is a better version of the Titans in a lot of ways, and they're 0-2, and they're playing at home for their season opener for the first time in front of fans in over a year. Why should we be expecting the Seahawks to play better against this team than they did against the Titans?
I don't agree that they're a better version of the Titans.
Okay, tell me why.
I think they're a worse version of the Titans. I don't think Kirk is as good as Tannehill. I don't know that either Thielen or Jefferson is as good as Julio or AJ Brown. And now, so maybe I'm off base here. Has the Titans' offensive line always been this bad?
It's the same offensive line they've had. It's actually it was better when Luan was.
Well, they had Luan and Conklin a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess that's maybe what I'm thinking of is because they lost Conklin then. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, defensively, I think the Vikings are better, but I think that on offense, I don't know. There's a huge difference, but I think kind of across the board at all the important skill positions. I would say the Titans are like 10% at least better. So, offensively, I have quite a bit more respect for the Titans.
I would agree with that. I would agree offensively for sure. I think everything Nathan said. I think they're almost better at every position. And I think Henry's a better back than Cook. But defensively, one thing that's interesting is right before when the Seahawks were rolling last year in that offense in the first 8 games, the one team that gave them trouble was Zimmer. And they had to pull some stuff out of their ass to win that game last year. And Russell's had some weird games against Minnesota, some amazing ones, some streaky moments. But they did pretty well against him last year. And they were one of the first teams that did that too high look that really slowed down their passing game. So I think defensively they have more pieces, but they're definitely not as physical if it's defense. Like Hunter's a really good pass rusher. Tennessee doesn't have anyone. But weirdly enough, Tennessee, with all these defensive linemen, are not doing great against the run. And their secondary is pretty bad. So I don't see a huge difference between the Titans and the Vikings as well.
Interesting. So Xavier Woods, by the way, was the safety I was struggling to remember. But I think we can agree to disagree a little bit on the receivers. I think you guys are selling Thielen and Jefferson pretty short, but especially where Julio Jones is in his career. And yeah, but that said, I think we can all agree that they're plenty good enough to victimize the Seahawks corners. So from a team makeup perspective, I don't see a big difference in terms of what the formula would be for the Titans to beat the Seahawks versus the Vikings to beat the Seahawks.
Let's play a game really fast. I'm going to run through the Seahawks schedule, and you guys tell me whether you think the Seahawks corners have an advantage over.
Nobody.
Oh, well, let's run through. Okay, so Vikings.
No.
Niners.
No.
Rams.
No.
Steelers.
No.
Okay. Saints.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Saints are probably yes.
Really?
Right? I mean, especially
Have you seen the Saints offense?
Yeah, and especially with will they have Michael Thomas at that point? I think he can come off pup that week.
Yeah, he does.
I forgot he was injured.
He may not actually play though. He's just eligible to come off. Packers. Or
No.
Sorry. Jaguars.
No.
I honestly don't think I can name a Jaguars receiver right now. Packers.
Definitely not one of them.
Yeah, definitely not one. I think Devontae Adams fits that. Cardinals.
No.
Washington football team.
Nope. Scary Terry.
Maybe did well with him last year.
Texans.
Yeah.
Bears.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Lions.
Definitely.
Okay, so I think we got like 3 or 4. We have like 3 or 4 just in the second half. That's actually better than I thought.
Yeah, some might be optimistic. I can't watch much more Trey Flowers anymore. I can't take it.
Well, so is this the week? Is this? I mean, I thought Mike Salk oversold his interpretation of what Pete said on the Pete Carroll show this week. And I thought some of the press did too. That the corners are quote battling, and that's a sign that Pete's saying that they're going to start looking at Sidney Jones and what's the kid from the Jets that they brought?
Bless Austin or something.
Yeah, Bless Austin. Do you guys buy that? Do you think that we're going to see Sidney Jones or Austin taking any snaps this week? Anybody? No.
It's possible. I don't think.
I hope so.
I'm not a no. I don't know that I would bet on it, but
He also
I mean,
said that they haven't been able to get in much practice time, and they haven't really done enough of rotating. I've seen enough. We know what I think it was someone, I think it was Nathan said players don't change a couple of years ago. Trey Flowers it's just that guy who's just always around the ball and never makes a play. And just gets beat. I can't hear anymore about like how he's turned a corner. I think he sucks.
Do the Seahawks really expect to make it throughout the entire year with him? Are
No,
they serious
well,
about it? Are they serious about a run?
I mean, Pete also mentioned that got less discussion. He mentioned Trey Brown coming off injury, after next week. And I think Pete is enamored with Trey Brown and is counting the days. So I think fans are looking at Sidney Jones. I think Pete's thinking about Trey Brown. So I don't know. I don't see the answer on this. I was excited about them getting Sidney Jones. I think it's a good ad. I don't think I'm not counting on him to change the trajectory of that cornerback group like in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say it's probably not fair to they didn't go into this year thinking this could be Trey Flowers. Like they've kind of ended up here by default, right? Witherspoon sucked. Trey Brown got hurt. They made a couple additions, after the 50 or right at and after the 53 got set. So they have tried to take some swings here, and I think this just defaulted at this point to Trey.
Yeah, Demarius Randall didn't work.
Yeah.
By the way, Keller
Pierre
Witherspoon
Desir.
did get 4 snaps in the Steelers game and gave up in 4 coverage snaps. He gave up a 61-yard pass.
Did you see the Henry Ruggs? Yeah, the Henry Ruggs touchdown right over him.
Just a reminder that we do have Patreon questions.
Okay. Sorry. Let's take some Patreon questions.
Well, I don't have it up just yet. I was
come on, hurry up. So
In a second, can they just sign Richard Sherman already? It's so infuriating.
He's going to go to Tampa.
Honestly, I
He's
feel
going to go
like
to Tampa 100%. He's going to be good.
That's going to be the thing that a basically quote free move that they can make without giving up picks or any kind of player capital, anything. All they have to do is give him money, and he's going to go play from someone else, and they're not going to have any option to upgrade that position.
All right, I'm going to put a hot take out into the world. The reason that they haven't signed Richard Sherman is because they know DK's ego can't handle going up against him in practice every day.
No way.
That's 100. That's it.
No
DK
way.
will just be a puddle if he has to line up against Richard Sherman.
You know what drives me crazy is all the takes out there that Richard Sherman is like no good anymore. He's washed. Like
That's major revisionist history.
I think that's just crazy. I will go as far as say like Sherman there's no way he's as good as he used to be, and injury issues, all that stuff's totally fair. Richard Sherman never was a cornerback that got by on his physical prowess. He was always a thinking cornerback. He was always reading the quarterbacks. He was always jumping routes. He had 3 steps on people because he knew where they were going to be trying to go. His brain's slower than it was, a while ago. He still understands how offenses are trying to attack him, and he still would be in the right place 20 times more often than Trey Flowers is. Like, it's just crazy to me to think that Richard Sherman is washed. It's just bullshit.
You know what's been bumming me out? The more I think about this, Jalen Ramsey went for like the same price as Jamal Adams. Why couldn't they have made that trade?
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about
that this week?
No. We can talk about Jamal, but
I know it was 2 firsts, and I think it might have been. I don't know if the third was involved.
So let's start off with a Patreon question because this is a really good one. You can only pick one player that overproduces or produces to your expectations or hopes on Sunday, and it would seriously move the meter on your optimism scale. Which player is it? It could be defense or offense.
Evan, typically we give the Patreon member a shout out when they give us good questions.
Oh, this was DJ Burnett, I think is how you say his name.
All right, and then I didn't actually hear your question. So.
He's so upset that you read it so poorly. You didn't even listen.
Yeah,
to it.
I was like stumbling all over the question. So you can only let me rephrase this. Pick one player to produce really well on Sunday, which would.
Who do you want to play well on Sunday? Is that the question?
I'm gonna pull up the Slack so we can do this.
I literally can't even fucking speak right now.
Jesus. And on that note, give the show a like and please subscribe. Sign up at patreon.com/hawkblogger to get your opportunity to have.
I don't know
your
why I
questions
can't talk
butchered
right now.
By Evan Hill.
I can't rephrase this.
How is DJ Burnett a hard one to pronounce?
No. It's the way he phrased it. I'm trying to rephrase it into a slightly different question. I can't figure it out.
Read his question exactly as he wrote it.
To you guys, what's something you would see Sunday that would boost your confidence back up in this team besides just a win? Like how the offense.
Okay, that's enough. Stop there.
That's
enough. Just stop. Jeff, what's your answer?
I would like to see the deception and the motion and the easy throws to tight end and the screen game. But bigger, what I would like to see is I want to see the run game and the pass game be married together again. One of the things that irked me in the game last week is that they felt like separate entities again. And there was a whole argument about Pete Carroll and what he said today. To me, what made that offense work so well is how everything opened up because everything was married together. And I want to see everything connected on offense.
My answer is pass rush because it's always going to be pass rush. I love pass rush and I'll be encouraged if it's good. And in addition to that, it would be Alton Robinson and Darrell Taylor, but specifically Alton Robinson getting more snaps and continuing to be a beast. And if Darrell Taylor joins that, all the better.
So what day do we start protesting outside the VMAC if Alton Robinson does not get more snaps?
Either way,
How the hell?
Way off here. Darrell Taylor is better.
I'm staging a picket.
How the hell does he strip sack a player? This is a coach that's all about the ball. Everything's about the ball. He gets like one of his first snaps and he sacks and causes a turnover and barely plays. What the fuck?
You don't think they could have used the 2nd and 20 or something in the second half?
Get it. All right.
Nathan, what's your answer?
I mean, I guess I want to see DK look
Good answer.
I want to just see, like, I don't need him to go crazy or anything. Let's just get a good, clean game.
I'd like to see I'd like to see Jamal force a turnover.
Good answer too.
Yeah, he's making no impact.
He's not playing poorly, but he's not playing up to the level that like we need him to.
Mm-mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, those comments from Pete were so concerning about Jamal this week.
Wait, what did he say?
Where we were talking about where he said they still haven't figured out how to utilize. To me, that brought up Jimmy Graham and Percy Harvin memories. I could spend an hour talking about some of the bad coaching they've done and the indictment of a lot of the moves they've made.
Yeah. I don't know if I was reading too much into that comment, but
I just found it brought back memories of, you heard what Jimmy said today about his time here. They've made these high profile trades and they haven't seemed to have a plan of how to utilize these guys. Because when Jamal played with Todd Bowles, and as much as Greg Williams was a fuck up, they had a very specific design for him that worked very well. He was a different player that we haven't really seen other than that Atlanta game. And I think that's an indictment on the coaches.
Yeah. Nathan, you want to take the next question since I can't read?
Yeah, sure. So we have two here, one from KDB, one from Mr. Hurlbutt. And both of them is just what is going on with DK? What do you think about DK? Talk about DK. Brian, why don't you kick us off on that?
Yeah, I feel like this offense is not yet looking like it meshes with his strengths. And I was really hopeful that what we were going to start seeing is just bread and butter DK plays, ones that are like, you know that play where the Seahawks, I'm sure, Maddie or someone could tell us what it's called, but like they do a play action, the tight end rolls back to help with pass. It's a max protect and Russell goes back. And that is a Tyler Lockett play. It is every first 4 or 5 games of the year, the Seahawks get like 3 or 4 60+ yard touchdowns off of that play. It's a Tyler play. where's the DK play? And I just don't see it. So I just don't feel like they've found his repeatable play. And I would hope it'd be the slant. At least he's a big dude, should be able to body that up, but we haven't found that. And honestly, like I've got to question a little bit of his mindset coming into the season. Like he's giving off super entitled, arrogant vibes. And last year he was giving off super alpha, confident vibes, and it's a fine line. And yes, I feel like he's a little bit out over his skis. And I'd love to see him earn his way back to having that swagger and maybe stop assuming that he deserves it.
I mean, yeah, I don't know that I see entitled. I definitely see frustration, and I think, I mean, it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be visibly frustrated. You know, I think so. See Mike Spin Move Griff was talking about this. He's Maddie's, you know, counterpart. Talking about how the under center game is maybe a little different with the timing on DK on some of the longer routes and stuff than some of the shotgun stuff that they were running last year. And so maybe that's part of it, and he's adapting. And you know, I think the thing that just has to get better is you can't have the penalties. You can't have the self-destruction, right? Which I don't think we've seen him self-destruct so much, but you know, he did have that holding and then the roughness penalty and all that, and that's the stuff that can't happen. Beyond that, I mean, to me, the on-field stuff, the demeanor, it doesn't worry me too much. But you know, at some point they have to work through it, and he has to be a little bit better. I also think that we're forgetting a little bit that he was pretty good in that first game. Not like amazing 1,500 yards good, but I think he still caught like 5 balls for 60 yards and a touchdown. Like if that's your bad game, that's pretty good, right? So I don't know. I'm a little frustrated. I made the joke about Sherman DK, but I really am a little frustrated with the how quickly it seems like fans have really turned on him. Like this dude was amazing for 2 years, and like you said, Brian, like he was, you know, a model teammate, and he's had some frustration the first 2 games, and he made a big mistake in this Tennessee game. But it's just so surprising to see so many people just seemingly anxious to turn on him and start, you know, throwing the diva label on him.
I don't think
I
it's
feel like I'm turning on him. Personally,
not you so much, but
no,
I
I
just
know. I just, as someone who's been critical of this show about it, I have really high expectations. I think he can be the best receiver in football. Like he's got that kind of talent, and there's no part of the start of the season that shows him on that trajectory, and there's no part of how he started that shows him as a matchup-proof receiver that people have to game plan for in crazy ways. I think they are game planning for him is the other thing that is happening. I think they are definitely trying to take DK away. But DeAndre Hopkins gets that treatment and he's productive. I want him to be that level. So I'm just frustrated that he and the coaches haven't figured out how to get him there. Sorry, Evan, I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think I've been seeing it that way, Nathan. I just think fans have really high expectations for him, knowing that he is going to be going into, you know, contract and extension talks, most likely at the end of this year. He's a leader on this football team, and maybe that's too high of a threshold or expectation to apply to him going into year 3, but I think it's how fans feel.
I think he is still playing well. Like the deep ball has disappeared, but you know, in that Tennessee game, he caught that little it wasn't really a screen, I don't think, a little flat route or something, and he juked and made the linebacker miss and then picked up like 6 yards, which was just all yak. There was a play where he caught where I think Russ kind of scrambled and he caught a ball over the middle of the field and he darted upfield and, you know, put his shoulder into a DB and fell forward for some extra yards and picked up a first down and all that. You know, his bread and butter, the thing that he is completely dominant and elite at, hasn't clicked this year. But I think you are still seeing him find ways to make plays. It's not as great as we want it to be. And then he is visibly frustrated as well, which I think is giving a perception that it's maybe worse than it is. His Titans game, like if you look at the numbers and stuff, it wasn't amazing by any stretch. It was not a great game, but I think that you can still see where he is growing as a receiver and still clearly an extremely good player.
Yeah, and I think really it's not that he's being a diva. I don't see that. I think he's just a little immature. And I do wonder, him and AJ Brown have a long hit. They were roommates in college. They were best friends. I wonder if he got a little just too jacked up for this game because AJ Brown didn't have a great game either. He was having uncharacteristic drops. And those two were best friends in college. They've compared each other they were rivals in high school. I read an article about, I wonder how much that matchup got to his head where he wanted to just prove that he's better than the other guy and almost lost himself.
But you know what that means? That's an area of growth that he
So
needs to.
I think it's maturity. I think,
yeah.
I don't see him being like, he's not demanding the ball or anything like that or freaking out. He's not getting the ball like he did at times last year. But to me, it's just a sign that he needs to mature. He's a young guy and there's still a lot of growth to him. So I don't find myself worried yet.
All right. How many more Patreon questions do we have?
Let's see here. All right. So Jeff Z-Ray wants to know about our third down conversion rate. So the poor third down conversion rate seems to be pretty consistent through the PC era. What needs to be changed and this is offensively, are Pete and Russell capable of change?
Frankly, no. I don't. Listen, I love Russell. He does so many good things. He's the best deep ball thrower I've ever seen in my life. Hopefully this offense will unlock him, but he's not the guy to just carve you up on third downs. And a lot of that has to do with vision and using the different parts of the field. And we've seen 3 different coordinators now, and more or less it would have been easy to blame Schottenheimer or Pete, but I just think it's a limitation in his game. And again, I don't know if that's his fault necessarily. It's Big Ben has the same kind of issue where he doesn't use that quadrant of the field. And it's nothing against Russell. I'm not coming out here with a hot take. I just don't think that's a strength of his game where he drops back in the pocket and carves you on third down. And that's sort of what Breeze and Brady and the guys he really wants to be are like. And again, Russell has so many strengths and so much uniqueness, but I just don't know if he's going to magically, even with a great coach or someone like Waldron, who might be a good coach, fix it. And maybe you got to have easier throws, more layups for him, but I just don't know if that's going to be part of his game.
I think Russ is getting off a lot easier than he should right now. I really do.
That was my initial takeaway from the game. I've kind of cooled on that a little bit, but on Sunday, that was my take.
Like Pete Carroll deserves all the conversation that's been happening there, and that's fine. It's well worn. The Russell's talk just seems to get quiet. And it's almost just like people don't want to talk about it because if it's real, then we're fucked. But the fact of the matter is, until Russell's a guy that can execute on third downs, those third downs are just a good scenario to think about. But until he's someone that can dissect those types of defenses and those exotic looks and those pressure situations and make the throws that need to be made, there's a real ceiling to how good this team can be, because it is all built on the assumption that he's going to be the one that leads this team to a Super Bowl. And it's pretty discouraging. That game, that second half was super discouraging in that light.
He's got to play better. It's that simple.
It's interesting. Did you guys hear any of the Manning cast the last couple of weeks? So this week Peyton was talking about the lines went too high on Aaron Rodgers. And Peyton was talking about the things you need to do to just beat that too high defense. And he was just talking about the key thing is just being boring, being patient,
taking the
checkdowns, using the run, and eventually the other stuff opens up. And Rodgers did a phenomenal job of it because eventually the game just opened up for him. And that just had me thinking, is that Russell's game? Can he do that? Because he's so good down the field and his eyes are always down the field. And it might be a coaching thing, but that just had me thinking, because when that's all Payne was talking about, that his football IQ is phenomenal. And when Russell was on there, they just almost seemed like they were in different leagues talking. But if Russell's a little boring and takes checkdowns, there was a weird comment by Pete. I'm not going to agree with that one, but
Wait,
yeah,
why? I thought that was a totally reasonable comment from Pete.
from there, but that
What's
play.
wrong with
play was
that?
on.
Why is Russell taking shots in the overtime? That
But I
shot
think
to
that
Tyler was
First
no
of all-
chance, and the shot to DK was no chance.
Okay, first of all, that the play that he specifically called out was the one to Lockett. It was nearly completed. First of all, it was a max protect. That play was designed to go there. So look, we can talk a lot about Russ, and I have
Were
a lot
there
of thoughts
players
about it.
open underneath?
No, because there was only
There's
like
nobody available for him other than
there
Lockett.
were like 3 routes. 2 of them were the receivers deep, and then Carson releasing late and chipping. And then, so the other thing, so first of all, people talk about him play in rhythm, just do what the play is supposed to. Well, that's what he did on that play. Now, the second thing is, if you go watch that play and watch how it unfolded, Carson came open very late, but it's a weird play with a linebacker who came in, then tried to robot back, and was right with Carson for a minute. There, a rusher came unblocked. So Russ would have had to like sidestep an unblocked rusher, find Carson, dump it off. By the time that happens, the defense reacts. So, like, would that have been the perfect outcome? Yes. But, like, to point to that one play and say he should have checked it down there, I'm not Pete. Pete knows a lot more about football than I do. Seemed like a very weird play to pick out and highlight. And I think generally, I'm gonna for like the third time here, I'm gonna shout out Griff, see Mike spin move. We've been talking a lot about Russell, and I've disagreed with him on quite a bit of stuff. But like the problem with Russ is not the short game, right? If there are flaws in Russ's game, it's what he can do in that intermediate range. That's what is missing. Russ attacks the short areas of the field quite a bit, and did in the Titans game. Right, he is kind of a boomer bust, and the question is, what can you get him to do in the middle of the field? That is a really big open question that doesn't look good for Russ and may just always be a limitation for him. But this idea that like, oh, he doesn't want to take a check down or doesn't want to throw quick, that's not really accurate. He wants to push the ball, like all that's true, but like he also can operate that quick game.
Okay, I know we're running out of time, and we got to get our picks in. So, any other questions on?
I'll just take this one from Sam Brown. He asks if any of us see Colby Parkinson contributing to this offense. Y'all can jump in if you want, but I think we should see if they can manage to get Gerald Everett or Will Dissly involved in this offense before we worry about Colby Parkinson. So, no, I don't think that's
a perfect way to answer that.
Yep.
Yes.
Cosign.
Yeah.
All right, so we got to talk about what we think is going to happen in this game. And Evan, I'm going to start with you. Seahawks come into this 1-1. Vikings are 0-2. What's going to happen? What's the score?
Oh man, I really don't want to do this, guys, but I think the Vikings might win this game.
And but what's the score?
30-20. They need this win.
Nathan.
They do.
I'm gonna go big on this one and say 34-23 Seahawks.
Okay. Pete Coe remains undefeated against Mike Zimmer. Jeff.
I'm conflicted on this game because I'm sort of with Evan where they need to win and they're 0-3 and their coach is fighting for his job. But I'm going to take the Seahawks. I think the way they lost is going to piss them off. And I think Russell has a nice game. So I think it's a weird game where Seattle wins by a field goal. I'll say 26-23.
You know, it's funny. The Vikings kicker has kicked 3 50-yard field goals, 3 for 3 from over 50 yards. And the one kick he's had from under 50 yards was 37 yards and he missed it. So I think the Seahawks are the better team. I really do. For a lot of the reasons Arif mentioned. And then I actually think the Seahawks defense is actually better than the Vikings defense. But I think that there's a lot of intangibles against the Seahawks in this scenario. And this to me feels like a Vikings win. It will surprise me if the Seahawks win. I think they definitely can, but I'm picking the Vikings to win this 34-27. And the Seahawks are going to be in real challenging situation if they looking 1-2 going to the 49ers the following week. Could be a really rough ride. So on the flip side, if they manage to find the way to win this game, go to 2-0 on the road, travel to San Francisco that has lost already like a shit ton of players and now all the running backs, and maybe the Seahawks could come out 3-1 and all of a sudden with things are looking super rosy. So this is a crossroads game. You're 1-1. It's early in the season. It is your first game against an NFC opponent, a conference opponent, and we're gonna see. This is gonna be really interesting, and this is where you need your best players to play the best. So, how is Jamal Adams gonna play? How is Russell Wilson gonna play? And frankly, we haven't talked much about it, but how is Chris Carson gonna play? Like the running game, whether you like them using it or not, we can all agree it sucked shit in this Titans game. It was awful. And so if they're going to do it, which we know they are, they better be good at it. Like, so that's another key factor looking at what's going to happen this week. And we get another view of these Seahawks corners against a pair of good receivers. So
sorry, well, real quick, how many of us just picked the win?
2.
Just 2? Wait, did you pick a loss?
I picked a loss.
I picked a loss.
All right,
Why?
never mind. I was gonna dunk on the chat because they're like freaking out about us being so negative, and I'm like, I think 3 of us just picked us to win, but I wasn't listening. So good job, chat. You win this one.
Nathan,
it's funny because if you asked us all our opinion at halftime last week after the first game, like I know what I was thinking at halftime. I'm like, I think we got a hell of a team here, and then the second half happens. And it's like a gut punch. It's amazing how the conversation changes.
I have text messages and even some tweets at halftime saying like, this is going to be a super uncomfortable game. Like everything in the first half made me feel like, other than the 2-minute drill scoring that they did, made me feel like the Seahawks did not have a sustainable plan on offense, and the Vikings were 0 for 3 in the red zone, and they could make this really tough on us.
They were up 14 points with 12 and a half minutes to go.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
it's funny. I have the same thought now. Like, I'm terrified now.
I am not terrified. I am disappointed, and I'm skeptical. Is the best word for me. I'm skeptical, and I just want to see this offense actually, as Evan said, be repeatable, be, multiple as they were, use the motion, use the deception. We didn't say anything about this today. We really should. D. Eskridge being out, I think, was a big deal. And he was out of practice again today with a concussion still. That's freaking serious. I can't remember the last time the Seahawks had a player that was out with a concussion for 1 week, didn't go to practice, and then was still out the following Wednesday. That's a serious brain injury that he's dealing with. So I don't think we know what that's going to look like. But I think Freddie Swain is not D. Eskridge, and they definitely did not use Penny Hart in any D. Eskridge kind of way. So yeah, that's going to be another thing to watch.
Why couldn't they use Everett?
I don't know. Yeah, there's lots of questions. With that, we're gonna wrap up for tonight. Please, if you haven't already, give the show a like, click subscribe. We're now over 7,000 subscribers. We're moving on up and still growing. Thank you for that. Click subscribe, click the bell to get notified when we go live, and go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger. We've got a bunch of new folks joining. We gave away charter seats to the game last week. Somebody, a patron that you all should know if you're in the Slack channel, got those great seats. We'll almost certainly have more tickets to give away and other great things to give away, only to patrons. So patreon.com/hogblogger, join. Worst case scenarios, you get instant access to the Slack channel and you meet a bunch of cool people. It's a great community, good people, treat each other well, and talk a bunch about the Seahawks. So commiserate when things go bad and celebrate when they go well. Hope to see you over there. Good luck to everybody this weekend. We're all going to be sitting on the couch rooting for them. And on that note, go Hawks.